Welcome to my channel Lenovate. In this video, we will going to discuss about the hormones of the posterior pituitary. We will also going to discuss about the role of the ADH and the oxytocin in the body with the secretion and synthesis of all the posterior pituitary hormones. So, starting from the formation of these hormones in the posterior pituitary gland. So first, these hormones are produced in the hypothalamus and they are stored in the posterior pituitary. This is shown the diagram of a posterior pituitary. The posterior pituitary is a part of a pituitary gland that is developed from the neuroectoderm at the 3rd week of development. So the development of pituitary gland has been discussed in a separate video. Here we will only going to focus on the synthesis of the hormones through the posterior pituitary and the role of these hormones in our body. So starting from the synthesis of these hormones, the two hormones that are the 10 amino acid peptides produced by the posterior pituitary are the oxytocin and the antidiuretic hormone. So starting from the synthesis from the nuclei located in the hypothalamus. Here in this diagram you can see that there are two nuclei, the paraventricular and the supraoptic nuclei. They are going to synthesize these oxytocin and ADH. The oxytocin is released by the paraventricular nuclei while the ADH is released through the supraoptic nuclei of the hypothalamus. After being released in the hypothalamus, these two hormones are transported through the hypothalamus through the infundibulum by a hypothalamic hypophyseal tract, that is a nerve fiber tract connection between the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary. After passing and transported through this tract, they become stored in the posterior pituitary. And number 2 important point is that through the area of transport, they are transported with the carrier proteins called neurophysin that are specialized present in the posterior pituitary. So the two hormones, that is the oxytocin and the ADH, with the neurophysin's protein, they are transported in the posterior pituitary after being synthesized in the hypothalamus. Now they remain stored in the posterior pituitary until the stimulation. What happens when there is a stimulus for the release? They will going to release by the exocytosis and they will going to release in the body and perform their actions. So until now we have been cleared about how the synthesis and the release of posterior pituitary hormone occur. Now we will going to discuss the two specific hormones with their important roles and function. So now first we are going to discuss the role of ADH or the antidiuretic hormone, also called as vasopressin. The vasopressin is going to act on the reabsorption of the water and it is an important hormone in osmoregulation of the body. So the stimulus for the release of ADH is the deficiency of water or the increase in the extracellular fluid osmolarity because of the increased amount of solute. Increased osmolarity or decreased volume of the fluid will going to stimulate the release of the ADH from the posterior pituitary. When there is an increased secretion of ADH from the posterior pituitary, the ADH concentration in the plasma will going to increase. Now what happens when this concentration become increased? The ADH will going to act on the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct and tubules of the kidney. Here it will going to increase the permeability of the water by increasing the receptors. The ADH or the vasopressin receptors present on the kidney become stimulated because of the presence of ADH and they will going to ultimately increase their permeability to water. This all happens in the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct of the kidney specifically. Now what happens next? When there is an increased permeability of water, there will be more and more reabsorption of water through the DCT and the collecting tubule in the kidney. When there is an increased reabsorption of water, that water will going to increase the decrease the plasma osmolarity and increase the water volume or the blood volume or the fluid volume in the body. So ultimately the water volume will be restored towards the normal. This whole is a mechanism that is called as the osmoregulation by the ADH, and that is important function performed by ADH in our body. Now coming to the role of oxytocin. Here you can see I have drawn two flowchart because oxytocin is a dual action hormone. This will going to act as a labor reflexor and this will also going to perform the milk letdown reflex. So first we are going to discuss the labor reflex. The labor reflex started from the baby pushes the cervix of the uterus to causing its stretch. When the baby at the time of the termination of pregnancy, it will going to stretch the cervix more and more. The stretching of a cervix stimulates the posterior pituitary in the brain to release the oxytocin from the pituitary gland. What happens when increased cervical stretching causes the release of oxytocin from the brain? There will be increase in the oxytocin, and that oxytocin cause positive feedback on the uterine contraction. And what happens now? The uterine contraction or the body of the uterus become more and more contracted, and more contraction from the uterine body, causing the baby to push towards the cervix, and there will be easy to deliver. So that's cause the labor, and that's labor is important for the parturition, and this whole reflex is caused by the oxytocin. The second function of the oxytocin and the milk leg down reflex is that what happens, the baby suckles the breast of a mother. The nipples will going to be suckled, and that suckling of the nipples stimulate the release of oxytocin from the posterior pituitary again. And this oxytocin will going to cause the myoepithelial cells of the breast to contract. Increased contraction of myoepithelial cells will causing the release of the milk from the alveoli into the ducts, and then there from the ducts into the lactiferous sinus and into the nipple. So at the end, baby will going to feed that milk. From the myoepithelial contraction, the milk will going to eject from the alveoli of the breast into the ductules of the breast, and at the end through the nipple it will going to eject out. So in this way, when the baby suckles the breast, there will be a release of milk, and this is called as a milk leg down reflex. This is the second important reflex produced by the role of oxytocin. So these are the two important functions produced by the oxytocin in our body, and mostly important for pregnant women. Now the second hormone we have just discussed is the ADH or the vasopressin, and I have detailedly tell you all the events and the role of oxytocin and ADH. So thank you for watching. Subscribe for more. If you have any query, comment below, like, share and subscribe our channel. Thank you.